Cool, might as well make a start then. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar. I'm David Canziora, Chair of the CFA Society, and we're here to talk about the FMA Fair Conduct Report. Joining me today, I've got fellow industry representatives Jim McElwain from Infins and also Colin McKinnon representing New Zealand Private Capital. Also, we've got our esteemed guests, Samantha Barris, CEO of the FMA, and Calvin Benedict, who's Head of Strategy and Planning. A little bit about Samantha. She's got over 30 years of international regulatory experience. She's held leadership roles in the UK with the Financial Services Authority, also with Gibraltar Financial Services Commission, the Business Banking and Resolution Service, bit of a mouthful, and also in general about her background, raised in Christchurch and began her career at the RBNZ. We're also going to be hearing from Calvin Benedict. As discussed, he was Head of Strategy and Planning, and Calvin's going to take us through various parts of the presentation. He has a background in planning, fintech, and innovations with teams. Prior to joining the FMA, he worked in Australia as well as the UK, providing financial sector consultancy, research, policy advocacy. He holds a master's degree in law and accounting from the London School of Economics and Political Science. In terms of format, we'll hand over to the FMA shortly for their presentation, and that will be about 20 minutes long. And then we'll have a quick roundtable with Jim and Colin in terms of questions from our respective audiences, and then we'll look to open up Q&A to the wider audience. To ask a question, all you need to do is enter it in the chat, and we'll try and summarize it and get around to as many as we can. Over to you, Samantha, Calvin.
Kia ora. Welcome. Absolutely delighted to be here to talk to our financial conduct report. It's here on the back of quite a lot of work that we've been doing on forward-facing, forward-focused, outcome-focused regulation. You'll recall that we published the 7 outcomes that we would be focusing our work on as a regulator. The financial conduct report that we've published, which will be an annual report, we're publishing it because we value transparency, accountability, and engagement. Our job as the FMA is to support a thriving financial sector, and that's remit has expanded, and you can see all the sectors that are set out that we will be regulating in the report. That will be added to next year with credits. So we have grown from looking to investor protection to more broadly covering all of New Zealanders' experience with conduct in financial services. And we have said that the approach that we want to take to discharging our remit to support a thriving financial services sector that all New Zealanders have confidence in is to be forward-looking, is to be anticipating the important risks and opportunities and to be addressing those. And what we are doing with this report is acknowledging both our need and our desire to be forward-looking, focused on the emerging important risks and opportunities, but also to acknowledge that we have limited resources. We can't do everything. So what we're wanting to do with this report is to set out for the sector what is going to be our focus for the forthcoming year, why it's our focus, what are the relevant outcomes that are important and we have in mind when we are that are the focus of the work. And for each of the sectors, both cross-sector and the 5 sectors that we're regulating, what are key takeaways for boards and senior management in firms. So it's about strategic focus and transparency. We will be producing this report on an annual basis. So in June of next year, we will be publishing our second financial conduct report. And that report will be both look back at what we said would be our focus for the 25-26 year and the emerging risks and opportunities that we have seen coming over this year and what will be our focus for the 25-26 year. I also want to sort of be clear that in terms of the scope of our regulatory activity, This sets out the priorities for our focus. It doesn't encompass all of our work. We remain committed to regulating effectively across all of our regulatory remit, but we think it's important that you have prior notice, that the sector has prior notice of what is very is a big priority for us. So should we move to the next slide?
Yeah, I think we lost your slides there from whoever was screen sharing. Maybe if they could just chuck them up again.
Okay, but that's fine because I can talk about how should this report be used, and it was a simple slide. So just bear with us, everyone. I think the key thing is what we are looking for. These are our priorities, and what we're looking for is for the report to be used by boards and senior management in firms to anticipate and to work with the things that we're going to be focused on, that they understand the FMA's expectations and regulatory focus, so can anticipate them in their own business plans for the year ahead. The other kind of in terms of use for the report is that we bring together in it a whole lot of actionable insights. So we bring together what we are seeing across the whole financial services sector, and that's very often in the why. What is our focus, and why is it our focus? And so what we're providing all of the financial sector with in this report is our view of and the insights from the work that we've done in the past year, and therefore what can be actioned in the year ahead. So I'll stop there, and Calvin, pass over to you for a kind of a bit of a look-see on the cross-sector and capital markets priorities.
Sure. Thank you. And just checking, you can all hear me?
Yep, we can all hear you.
And the slides are storming up.
Yeah, you just need those slides back up again. Otherwise, all good. Oh, now we have lost your audio.
Slides, but they're very high level and they pretty much reflect what's in the FCR. So a couple of intro comments from me. As Sam said, as a regulator, we are committed to providing transparency on our priorities. And this document is that essentially in terms of its purpose and what we're trying to get out of the engagements particularly on our regulatory priorities. One of the things to highlight, and you'll see it in the cross-sector and the capital markets section that I'll talk a bit more about, is really the insights, as Sam said, that we've found through our supervisory work, through our enforcement, through our guidance, through our engagement, as well as our broader desk-based research and planning. So in terms of cross-sector priorities, what are they? So firstly, as we know, New Zealand's financial markets are impacted by both global and domestic developments, and the FMA activities and our remit means we have broad reach and scope across the financial sector. And so our cross-sector priorities apply to all the businesses that the FMA regulates. And so I'll walk through the four high-level focus areas that we've signposted within the FCR. So firstly, we've got supporting innovation and reducing unnecessary regulatory burden. On the supporting innovation piece, what we are particularly attuned and focused on is our pilot regulatory sandbox. And you would have seen a fair bit of media on this in the last couple of months, going back to the start of this year. But what we're really trying to get out of this pilot work is to get firms to think about how can they test new products and services in a more controlled and safe environment, really to understand what are their future regulatory obligations and how can they safely develop those business models to align with those obligations over time. One of the other things we're very much attuned to is the reducing of unnecessary regulatory burden. And what we've called out in the FCR is our commitment, particularly to the development of a single conduct license under Part 6 of the FMC Act. And so that, again, will be a cost-cutting initiative that will help streamline the regulatory system and how participants interact with the FMA. I think the slides might be coming up now, hopefully.
Yep, looking good. Thank you.
Yep. The third piece I'll call out here is emerging risks and opportunities. As Sam said, as a regulator, we need to respond to emerging risks and opportunities and also be much more forward-looking in our approach. That's part and parcel about being an outcomes-focused regulator. And so there are three key areas that we're calling out in the emerging risk and opportunity space. Firstly, that's the growth of private markets, which we've seen both globally and particularly within the New Zealand context. We want to learn more about these markets, how they're evolving, how they're changing, what are the impacts for us. We might talk about that a bit more later. The other piece for us is virtual assets and tokenization. Again, a focus that's been in our space for the last couple of years, but we're particularly seeing trends of misconduct, particularly in the virtual asset space. And we're potentially looking at what does law reform and a right-sized regulatory system look like from that perspective. The third piece is operational resilience. And so as we've proposed, we'll be doing a thematic piece with certain parts of the sector, really to get an insight of what are we finding in terms of insights and what further guidance and interventions might be useful over the next few coming months. The third piece that we have is protecting consumers and disrupting scams. So we're focused on ensuring consumers know how to raise complaints and also receive timely remediation. This is quite a big call out for us in the cross-sector chapter. And on the scam piece, we're actively working with other agencies and businesses to increasingly disrupt complex scams, particularly by New Zealand perpetrators. And you'll see, as we've done before, we'll continue to issue public warnings to raise awareness. And the fourth piece I'll cover off is custody of client assets. So the safekeeping of client money and property is essential for market confidence, as we all know. And so we're working quite closely with our Ministry of Business to strengthen protections for assets held in custody. And I'll move on, Heidi, to capital markets. So I'll start off again with an intro of capital markets, and I guess this goes without saying, but again, just to highlight the importance of the sector. We all know well-functioning capital markets are essential to a strong, resilient New Zealand economy. And as a regulator, we play a key role in maintaining the integrity and effectiveness of our capital market sector. And so there's a few insights that I'd really particularly like to call out, which we highlight in the report. So firstly, in the wholesale investment space, we're focused on stopping false, misleading, or unsubstantiated claims. We've asked the High Court to clarify legal issues around the eligible investor certificate, and we're waiting on a ruling for this. The other piece for us is ethical investment disclosures. We know that from our work that needs quite a bit of improvement from what we've seen. And underlying that is investors often trust claims without questioning the reasons behind that. And so while we've seen some good practices of firms doing this well, we've also seen many disclosures which are unclear or inconsistent. And that's definitely on our radar. So we'll be issuing updated guidance to the industry to allow for more transparency, but also to uplift what we see as higher standards for advertising. In public markets, we're focused on monitoring insider conduct, and that's particularly involving directors and senior leaders. And one of the things we are very conscious about within the listed issuer space is making sure that disclosures reflect both changes within the market and economic and geopolitical implications. And you'll see that particularly in our focus on continued disclosure obligations. The other piece for us, and sort of signposted by Samantha earlier, is there's a significant amount of law reform proposed for the sector. And so we are supporting MB in that law reform, engaging with our minister. And one of the things we're trying to underline in those engagements and that support for law reform is making sure that we achieve those objectives of strengthening capital raising, enabling investment, and ensuring stronger capital markets for New Zealand. And so as you'll see in the slide, there's three key questions that we're asking CEOs, senior leaders, and broader management to consider. So for wholesale offers, are you confident your disclosures provide appropriate transparency to allow investors to make informed choices? The second one is, do you have the necessary processes to consider the materiality of information, manage access to that information, and ensure prompt disclosures? And the final piece for us, do you have the oversight of conduct within your business and support a culture of improvement that prevents serious misconduct, for example, through a rigorous trading policy that deters insider conduct? And I think that's the end of our presentation.
Cool, thank you. Let's have a look. I think we'll just start with a round table where we kind of get various views from our industry representative bodies, and then we can sort of then open it up to the wider audience chat. So hopefully people are asking questions in the chat there. We'll have a look through those in a minute. But just sort of like to kick things off, Can you give us some examples of, a good and poor conduct that you've seen in the market, and, what can we learn from it?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of good examples of good conduct in the market, in particular sort of thoughtfulness in the disclosures that are being put out. So thoughtfulness and understanding who are the targeted investors, and therefore where and how should we be, and what do they need to be able to understand the proposed investments. The kinds of things that we have seen that are worrying us have been, and as Calvin was saying earlier, are examples where the marketing of a particular, say in the ethical area, the way that a product is marketed as a green or ethical product isn't actually backed up by the substance of the investment product. That's a key area. That's a key area for us. Another area has been with the wholesale investor wholesale eligibility certificates. That's a constant area. That's a constant sort of trouble for us, where wholesale offers are being marketed in a way that's attracting retail investors into the wrong type of investments for them.
Right, and I think just to add to Sam's point, on the good side, to add to what Sam said, we've also seen definitely proactive engagements on our regulatory expectations, which is very encouraging to see, and evidence of strong internal controls and oversights by providers and firms. On the negative side, one other thing to add from Sam's perspective is the misleading or unsubstantiated claims. And I think for us, that's definitely a key call out, particularly within our capital markets sector.
And we are seeing conduct risks in ownership changes as well. And this is an area that's actually subject of some law reform that's going through the select committee process at the moment, where most of the time when we have change of control in firms, it's absolutely fine. Occasionally, there is a change of control that presents a great deal of worry to us in terms of culture and governance risk inside the firm. At the moment, we cannot prevent that from happening, and we can only act after. And it can take quite a long time to deal with the crystallized risks that emerge from that. So that's an area, and it's a priority. It's a priority for us, and that's one of the reasons why we've been advocating very strongly the law reform that is being discussed at the select committee and is currently government policy.
When you're looking at the good, you're talking about the good and bad, and I guess we've got good, bad, and the ugly sort of out there. How do you balance that sort of carrot to stick ratio in terms of making sure, focusing on the right areas?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll kind of give a high level response, and Calvin will pick it up. So carrot and stick is a constant. We are not an enforcement-led regulator, and so we constantly look for ways to encourage the right behaviour and the right kind of products and the right culture and governance within a firm. At the heart of our work is an understanding that good conduct is driven by strong culture and strong ethics. So when we're looking at one of the things at a high level that we look at when we're kind of judging, as you put it, the carrot and stick, is in addition to crystallized harm and the risk and the extent of that, and the extent to which that harm has been allowed to occur by the firm and has been going on for a long period of time, which is when we are more likely to consider the stick or in using a formal enforcement tool. But if we can see in a firm that there is genuinely a strong desire, a strong culture, strong ethics that's driven clearly by strong leadership from the board and senior managers, and something has gone wrong, then that is an area where we would look to work with the entity to work with them to put things right. So it's we will keep coming back to culture, governance, ethics, because they drive, our experience and what we observe when we look at things going wrong and things working well it's very, the consistent theme is the culture that is driven from the top of an organisation. That's why it's such an important focus for us.
And just to add to Sam's points there, so I think for us that there's almost two different elements here. There's the general broad approach that the FMA takes, which as Sam noted, we have a suite of tools from proactive engagement, which we would much prefer to do with the industry, all the way up to enforcement and litigation. Obviously, every circumstance is individual, and so we will need to take a tailored approach to the different cases and entities that we find before us. One of the key things for the FMA, though, is the notion of proportionality, to make sure that we're acting accordingly in response to that risk and opportunity, as you said, but it's done in a proportionate way that it leads to the right outcome for us. And it's something that we're very conscious about in our decision making and in our interventions.
And we're looking for that to represent an efficient use of our resources as well. And I think the other point is that this financial conduct report is in and of itself part of the kind of educative, forward-looking approach that we've taken, so that there is strong predictability in what firms can expect of us in the things that we're worried about. So that provides firms who are looking to focus on the right things, looking within their governance to work well with us. It provides them with some very clear forward-looking signals on the things that we're going to be focusing on.
Yes, obviously, culture and governance is critical to good conduct, Sam and Kelvin. How does the FMA assess these often qualitative aspects, and what signs would indicate whether a firm's culture is strong or needs work?
Yeah, so I'll kick off at a high level, and then Calvin will pick up on some of the details. So just the point, culture drives conduct, and what we are looking for and what we'll be assessing in our senior communications, the conversations that we have at board level and senior level within a firm, is a strong understanding and buy-in to the underlying objective of our regulatory requirements, that they don't take a quite prescriptive approach or thought to our requirements. And a good example for us has been things like remuneration incentives behind sales products. And the underlying objective that we have there isn't just around the way in which bonuses and remuneration are paid to staff and advisors. It's actually the ultimate objective that we're looking for here is that customers are not pressed or pushed to buy products that aren't good for them. And there's all sorts of things a firm can do that can lead to that. It's not just the way in which people are remunerated. It can be by the employment expectations, goal setting. There can be a variety of ways in which a firm can act that can lead to inappropriate pressure on consumers to buy products that aren't good for them. And what we're looking for at a board level is that understanding. If we're having a conversation at a senior level in a firm where they're saying, well, actually, this has nothing to do with our remuneration, using this example, this is to do with our HR policy, that's the wrong conversation. And that tells us that there isn't a strong understanding in the firm of the underlying objective of what we're looking for. In contrast, if we can have outcome-focused conversations at the board level and the senior management level, where it's very clear that they understand the risks and opportunities from their business model to good outcomes for their customers, then that's a great place. That's a really happy place for us to be.
Thank you very much.
And just on my additions, so I think there's quite a famous saying that culture is everywhere and nowhere. And part of it for us as a regulator is we know culture is a driver of conduct. And to Sam's points, one of the things we're really conscious about is, does the tone from the top, from what we're seeing from boards and senior leaders, match with what we're seeing on the ground in terms of the experiences of consumers? And so that's particularly one of the links that we draw out, and we want to draw out particularly in our ongoing supervision going forward as well.
Yeah, I mean, every firm tells us in one way or another that customers are at the heart of everything they do, that showing up well for their customers is first and foremost what they're there to do. That's what they tell us, that's what they market. Some firms do that really well and others don't in practice. So, and that's what we, that is where we're wanting to move our discussions and move the kind of culture in the financial services sector in New Zealand.
Thank you.
Thank you. On mute, Colin. Sorry.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
We can.
we can now.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, technology. Samantha, private markets is obviously a focus for you.
Yes.
In what ways does this report, the financial conduct report, demonstrate your work to understand private markets?
So we're looking to understand both understand private markets more, understand the risks and opportunities that are presented from private markets. It's evident that there's been a decline in private markets, which has an impact upon choice and opportunity for investors. And it's, we very strongly acknowledge that there is an opportunity to expand investor return with their long-term investments and savings through private markets. But there are three risks that we are worried about and we will be focusing on in relation to private markets. The first is around valuation. The second is liquidity risk management, and third is conflicts of interest. So I'll sort of touch on I'll touch on each of those, but first of all, I'll start with liquidity risk management. We did some work about 3 years ago, 2-3 years ago, that demonstrated that in relation to the public markets, liquidity risk management in some quite large areas of the sector was not where it needed to be. So you did not have, we had too many examples of not stress testing, not having formal policies in place and then testing against those, and looking at, and really kind of asking and answering that basic question that you expect from investors, from investments, which is, as an investor, are the promises made to me on redemption capable of being delivered by the firm? It's kind of a match between liquidity and redemption promises that are made. And so this has been an area that we have identified already, and we put some guidance out last year. It's an area that becomes even more important as you expand into more into private markets, because those inherently bring more challenges around liquidity, around valuation, more thinking over actually how are the redemption promises that I'm making being matched. So that's an area that we're wanting to understand. Well, we do want New Zealand to benefit from private markets. But it needs to be done well, and it needs to be with eyes wide open as to the risk. The other area of risk that we're worried about, and we have seen, we see pretty constantly actually, is around conflicts of interest. So things like related party transactions, which are more hidden when you're in private markets. So this is it, and we deliberately use the term risk and opportunity because it is both, and it's an important area for us, particularly against the backdrop of the decline that we have seen in public markets. But Calvin,
I think that's a very good summary. I think one of my other observations, and we called this out a bit in our other publications, is this is a global phenomenon. So it's not just a New Zealand change in terms of the growth of private markets. So it's a global phenomenon, and it's been a global phenomenon for a few years. And so other regulators that we speak to, whether that's ASIC or the FCA, are balancing that similar point that Sam said about how do we balance that growth piece with making sure that investors don't suffer unnecessary losses or incur unnecessary harm.
So I was at the International Organization of Securities Regulators conference in May. It's actually quite a fun conference to go to. It's kind of where it's better than it says on the tin. But one of the themes that was coming across there, which I found really interesting was a strong awareness that, just say looking at pensions, as across all of the first world economy, you've moved quite definitively over the last few years from defined benefit to defined contribution. You've got there are whole issues arising over, as public markets have shrunk, are investors, and as you've got various pension freedoms and things have come up, a real regulatory awareness at the international level that retail investors may be missing out on the opportunities that are provided by private markets. And the reason that I'm mentioning that is that it is important to underline the extent to which globally regulators see private markets as opportunities, but the risks need to be managed.
Thanks, Sam. Obviously, private markets have many, many nuances in terms of the whole range of products that are offered in private markets. What is the role of industry representatives across those different product sectors for you? What do you want from the industry representatives?
I think probably I'll pass over to Calvin, but at a high level, I think there's an important role for industry representatives, and this is based on my regulatory career over 30 years in helping to articulate and working with their members to articulate what are the outcomes that we're looking for from the work that we're doing, and to look to opportunities to engage with us, and to kind of work and to help some understand that they're kind of like a really good bridge between regulator and firms, but also to communicate and to tell the stories of the industry experience to us, so that we understand where the areas of difficulty may be being felt in complying with regulatory requirements. An important theme for me has been that we listen as well as talk, and that we understand how our sort of regulations and requirements are being felt on the ground, and that we look for opportunities to make it easy where it's possible to do that without cutting across the outcome that we're looking to achieve.
Great. I mean, that largely covers it. I think Sam's point about storytelling is really important from my perspective. I think one of the things we are looking for is, tell us where you find the barriers, where you're finding the hurt, where you're finding the issues that you're currently incurring within the regime or outside the regime. And also tell us again where the opportunities are, so we as a regulator can help respond and help create that efficient system where we can as well.
And sometimes one of the things that we do come across, and we've called it out publicly a bit, and we'll do some more, is where what I would term over-compliance is happening. So there is quite a risk-averse approach that's being taken, that's leading to costs that are completely unnecessary. I mean, the classic one for me is always in the AML space, where someone's looking for an identification, and they say it has to be a valid passport. We cannot use an expired passport, but an expired passport is still a valid form of identification. And that's a tiny example, but it was the first time I came across this, I thought, that which was some years ago, it really kind of brought home to me that the storytelling can also be to help us to understand, and you to understand and communicate where actually there is an overly risk-averse approach to compliance that's happening in a way that's adding cost to firms and cutting across consumers getting great services.
Thanks, Sam. That's much appreciated. Can we just drill down a little bit on something that's particular to the private markets? The report calls out some misleading wholesale issuer disclosures. What trends are you seeing in wholesale advertising, and what guidance would you give issuers to stay compliant?
Yeah, so at a high level, let's start with the marketing. So first of all, the issue that worries us most is the bringing in of retail investors through the eligible investor self-certification through the eligible investor scheme into wholesale offers. New Zealand is quite an outlier internationally in relation to that regime, and we are constantly battling this as far as marketing of wholesale investors in areas and advertised in areas where it's going to be picked up by ordinary retail investors, and who are going to come through the self-certification, and it's an area of ongoing harm.
And just to add to Sam's point, I think one of the pieces for us is obviously just to remind everyone of our fair dealing obligations. So do not mislead or deceive. That's one of the baseline requirements that we do have in the wholesale space, and an ongoing expectation for us at the FMA.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And avoid retail style promotions.
Sounds like you need a big stick.
Yeah, when I arrived 3 years ago, I was horrified to pick up Kia Ora magazine on Air New Zealand to see an evidently wholesale investor being marketed in what was clearly a retail retail way. That's just not acceptable.
Yeah, I think we're on your side.
Great.
Then, Kelvin, what practical changes should we be making in organisations right now in response to the report?
Do you want to go?
Yeah,
Do you want me to go?
you go.
So what we've done in the report is essentially highlight where we will focus our regulatory efforts over the next 12 months. And as Sam mentioned earlier, particularly the key takeaways for CEOs and for senior leaders, that's really what we want firms to think about going forward for the next 12 months. There's also risks and opportunities for firms to think about in terms of their own operational and conduct risk management. And so this report is, as Sam said, a tool to communicate where you can expect us as a regulator to focus, and so you can proactively do those efforts yourself before you potentially hear from us going forward. Sam?
Yeah, I think that covers the ground really well.
Thank you.
Can you also talk to us about, like the top 2 or 3 regulatory focus areas over the next coming year, and sort of what we might need to do to prepare for that?
So it's covered. It's set out in the report, but I'm going to pick out one that that we haven't talked about in this so far in this webinar, and that's around the issue of product reviews. We're particularly highlighting that for the insurance and banking sectors, but there is a general need to look at and continually look at the product lines that are offered, and particularly the aged product lines, to see whether they're still fit for purpose and they're delivering value to customers. So that's a key area for us.
And it fits with obviously the COFI regime coming live earlier this year. And so as you'll see, particularly in the chapters relating to deposit taking insurance, that's the primary focus that we have in discharging COFI for the first year as well.
Cool, thank you. I'm just having a look through the chat, see if we've got anything else interesting there. Let's have a look. We've got someone asking whether the FMA is going to increase resourcing to meet its objectives. Can you talk about how the FMA is approaching the use of AGI? Or is it just AG? Hang on.
AI, yeah.
Oh, general intelligence. Yep, sure.
So, yeah, artificial intelligence. So we have been working hard to make sure that we can deliver and can continue to deliver within our fiscal envelope. We have, of course, received increased funding as a result of COFI, and the last tranche of that will be coming through in the 25-26 year. We have been looking at the way that we use resourcing, both what do we need to do for our frontline? By frontline, I mean, our supervision, our licensing, the people you see, every day, and where do we need to be focusing what we call our enabling. We have been piloting AI internally. We're getting some great results from the use of AI in terms of efficiency savings. And we'll be continuing to kind of look into ways in which we can improve the efficiency that we're working with the sector. We're looking at ways to make it easier for the sector to do their ordinary business with us when it comes to things like regulatory returns, how we can make those more streamlined, more automated. And that's a big focus for the investment that we will be making over the coming months and years.
Cool. Thank you. I've got someone set me up here. How does CFA ethics education mesh with FMA expectations? Well, I guess we could talk for ages, but that's probably not the point of the webinar. But I think there's a pretty broad overlap. And again, it's that principles-based, looking at outcomes, sort of providing that framework for decision making rather than sort of thou shalt A or B, just to make sure people, lay down the principles. And there's a lot of overlap around, independence, objectivity, fair dealing, integrity of capital markets, all that sort of stuff. So I'd say there's a pretty good overlap there.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, and I'm speaking from a long regulatory career, when you are working with anyone who is a well-regarded member of a professional body with ongoing ethical requirements, CPD requirements to maintain those ethics, those always, that they're a great match for what we are looking for from when we're talking about culture, ethics. There's an obvious overlap there.
Kill two birds with one stone. You get your CFA charter, all good. So we've got another comment there. I know the FMA comments on some wholesale offerings appear to be targeting a wider retail audience based on how they're marketed. I think you're talking to this before. What examples are you seeing that are of concern, and what guidance can you offer to wholesale offerers? I guess your New Zealand example is pretty pertinent there, but anything else to add?
Yeah, so actually I think it's pretty basic actually, which is avoid retail style marketing of your offers. If you're using the eligible investor certification regime, that should automatically, if you want to use that and you're seeing that use, that should automatically lead to some risk flags over making sure that whoever is coming in using that regime genuinely understands the investment that they are being offered, and that it isn't just, I mean, what we see is almost like a factory process where these certificates, where people who clearly don't have, just they've sold their farm and they've got a few million, but actually all their background doesn't give them the they've got the cash, but the background doesn't mean that they actually understand the investment and the risks from the investment that we're being put into. So I think it's two things. First, if you use it is the avoid retail style. Is your mum or your brother or your best friend going to be accessing this ad, in which case you probably want to pull it. And then the second is, if you're using the eligible investor certification, ethically, I would, if I was using it in a firm, I would almost have like a devil's advocate on my board, in my team, to challenge the way that I am using this certification and challenge the risk of people being inappropriately brought in.
So just signing the piece of paper is not likely to prove, if someone's given the piece of paper, it's probably not enough, you're saying?
Absolutely not. And some, I mean, we've seen some really poor practice around the countersignature. I mean, this is why we're doing a case stated, and we've covered it in the financial conduct report. We've seen some really poor practice around the countersignatories from a so-called professional person against those certificates. It's a real source of harm. And it actually takes up a lot of our resources to deal with it. And so that's why the more we can, while we've got this regime, this is the regime that's in New Zealand, while we've got the regime, we will take huge comfort if at the senior level within firms, we are seeing that they are making a genuine effort to make sure it's used well. And I think that the point I made before, I mean, this is just a recommendation. This is what I would do. I would have objective challenge to the way in which we're using those certificates.
There's a
A
comment
great
here.
job actually for CFA members.
Exactly. Everyone can up their game. There's a question around. Try and not get you skewered. Let's have a look. It's about the High Court guidance on the eligible investor certificates. Does the FMA have any update on when the decision is likely to be released?
No, we don't have an update to provide on that.
Fair enough. And there's a question, it's more of a statement here, I guess, about the low liquidity in New Zealand markets posing a significant barrier for investors. I think, particularly international ones, I think that is definitely true. I guess it might be interesting just to hear Colin's thoughts on that one, if you want to field that, Colin, sort of how that works with, we obviously see a bit of Australian private equity turning up into the New Zealand market, but it is pretty shallow, both in terms of listed and unlisted. What are your thoughts on how that's
Sorry,
how that impacts the
I was
investors we get?
distracted momentarily. David, can you just repeat the question?
No,
for
it's
me?
all good. It's all good. Didn't see that one coming.
So what's the question?
I was just someone commenting about the low liquidity in the New Zealand equity markets and how that's a significant barrier for investors, particularly international, and interested in our thoughts on that. And I was mostly agreeing with that statement, but interested in your thoughts as well.
Well, I'm presuming the statement was about public markets, not private markets. Would you agree?
Depending on the investors, I thought I was going for the private angle, but anyway, well, I guess we can cover a bit of
Okay.
both.
Yeah, well, I guess the assets that are owned by private equity and venture capital firms in New Zealand are global assets, and they are traded on a global marketplace. So I'm not sure that I really understand the question. These are private market activities that occur between willing buyers and sellers, and those willing buyers and sellers are working in a global environment. But I have one question, please, if I wouldn't mind, David. I wonder whether Samantha's prepared to express which sectors she's particularly worried about in private markets at the moment. And for example, is private debt, which I understand is a concern for your Australian colleagues. Is that something that you're concerned about in the New Zealand market?
I would. I'm going to not answer the question
No, I
directly.
didn't expect you to.
Yeah, because and that's for very good reason. I don't want to set hairs running. We're being very purposive when we're using private markets, which is both debt and equity, and we are still in a discovery phase. And what we're wanting to do is kind of understand where the developments are. So it may be that we can write more about this in the financial conduct report that we publish next year. But for now, we're very open-minded.
Okay, thank you.
Also look to put Jim on the spot as well. Is there anything else in the chat, Jim, that you think would be of interest for your members? If not, I've got a filler that we can do. Is another question here. We've got, will the FMA receive additional resourcing in connection with the proposed new change of control regime?
In terms of change of control approvals, no, we won't. We'll be working within our existing budget. In fact, it's one of those so the two new powers that are currently before the government policy, that are currently before the select committee, so on-site inspections and change of control, will help us, particularly against an expanding remit, will help us to use our resources more efficiently, because we will be able to move faster to deal with emerging risks of harm, rather than putting a lot of resources into having to deal with it once something has gone wrong. And that's good news for the industry, because they pay the vast majority of our fees. It's certainly good news for New Zealand, because it means that we'll be able to get in ahead. We're more likely to be able to get in ahead of harm occurring. And on that, and actually, I'll kind of, while I'm on site inspections, New Zealand is an absolute radical outlier. I think I actually cannot think of either a respectable or unrespectable jurisdiction that doesn't have for its conduct regulator on-site or change of control powers. We had them when we were the Securities Commission. Most regulatory bodies in New Zealand have them. One of the things that we do struggle with is that a big part of our proactive work is to do on-site monitoring. We can only go on site to work with firms in the way in which that they are complying with our requirements, with the permission of the firm. And so the ones that where we have real struggle over quite a period of time is those that refuse to allow us to come in and do monitoring visits, and that builds in a lot of inefficiency, and that's your money and its consumers being harmed in that process.
There's also some interest in the chat around when you're assessing the risk of private markets, what sort of risks do you think you'll be looking at? Particularly, there might be transparency, liquidity, leverage. There's obviously a whole host of extra concerns when looking at private assets. So is there any guidance around how people should think about that?
Again, I think we are in discovery phase for what those risks are. But as Sam pointed out, at a very high level, related to valuations, conflicts of interest, they're going to be the key drivers for our first bit of inquiry into the space.
Cool, fair enough. Just try and find some others here. Someone's interested in... Oh, yeah.
You're on mute, Jim.
Oh, no. Oh, Jim, when need you off mute. There we go.
Sorry, apologies for that.
Off again.
Yeah, thank you. The remediation, there's a couple of questions, the chat about remediation. I was thinking about the Australian banking inquiry, and that poor remediation, compounded the felony of, the fees for non-service. Will you be publishing any guidance of best practice on remediation? What's good and bad in that space? Is there anything in there?
Do you want to pick? Yeah. So I think, in terms of remediation practices, there's quite a lot that can be learned from in terms of our enforcement, the enforcement cases and the public outcomes of those. I think in terms of guidance, I would, it should be pretty obvious what needs to happen here, which is early identification that something's gone wrong. It's kind of early identification that something's gone wrong, in contrast to what we have experienced, which is firms have known something's been going wrong for ages and have done nothing about it for quite a long time. So early identification, understanding what the cause of the problem has been, understanding the lost customers, good communication with customers to let them know that they are due money, quick payment of that money, early notice to us that something's gone wrong and there is a remediation practice underway. So it kind of gets back to the complaints priority as well for us, which we think for firms with a strong culture and strong ethics, it should be obvious what the approach to remediation should be, which is their customers are out of pocket. Fix the problem, communicate well with customers, get the money back into their pocket as soon as possible, and keep close to us.
And just to add to Samantha's point, obviously, Jim, when that came out on the Australian Royal Commission, our conduct and culture reports again talked about remediation and the importance of timely and accurate processes. So one of the things, obviously, for us is it is a priority for the next 12 months for the FMA. So as we go through and see what reactive inquiries we get, and also what comes out through our supervisory work, we'll see what next in terms of anything else that we might need to put out.
Yeah, so you'll see, in the priority around product reviews in the banking and insurance sector, we are concerned where we have not had any communication or engagement with firms in the banks insurance sector to at all to say that anything has gone wrong, because that seems, given what we have seen amongst in the reports that we've had from banks and insurance companies, we want to understand, particularly in some of the aged products, whether there are other remediation issues which should have been picked up, which haven't been picked up, and that's why we're putting a big priority on product reviews. I'm mindful in the life and health sector, some of those product lines are really aged, 30, 40 years, for 30, 40-year-old product lines, and we're looking for those to be reviewed. Are they delivering, basic question, are they delivering what the customers reasonably expect them to deliver? If not, what needs to be done to make good? Also, in terms of remediation, sort of, it's around the product reviews. It's understanding where you've got customers who are trapped in particular products, and they need, and actually there are better suited products, but they can't leave them, for example, pre-existing conditions in health assurance or some such thing. So, yeah, there's a lot in the priority on the product reviews that we have got in the FCR.
Thank you.
Cool. That's probably a good point to wrap up on, and we're at time anyway. So thank you for the presentation, Samantha and Calvin. Much appreciated. And contributions from Colin and Jim, and also to everyone giving us their lunch hour. I hope Brett's still on the treadmill listening to this in the gym, so we'll be checking later.
Great. Well done, Brett.
Well, we'll see, won't we? We'll figure it out. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Catch you later.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.